Please sit down, turn and face that man and just want to give his time. Before you sit down.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You swear to first testimony you give today the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Have a seat. Now,
Okay.
pronounce your first and last name. Spell your first and last name for the courts.
It's Kimberly Underwood, KIMBERLYUNDERWOOD.
Now, you can please share this close.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Detective Underwood.
Good afternoon.
How are you?
Okay.
Would you please start off by telling the court where it is that you currently work?
I am a pretty much contract worker with the City of Atlanta Police Department as a detective in the Atlanta Police Gang Unit.
How long have you worked as a contract detective with the Atlanta Police Department Gang Unit?
I retired in December of 2022. So I started back as a contractor March 1st of this year, 2023.
You mentioned that you work in the gang unit.
Yes.
Is that where you worked before you retired?
Yes,
And how long did you work there?
13 years.
All right. What were your responsibilities as an investigator with the gang unit?
I was responsible for investigating gang crimes, investigating gang members, gathering intel on gang members, doing prevention from gang members, intervention, and also enforcement. I had to do arrest warrants, search warrants, cell phone search warrants, residential search warrants, anything to do with investigating criminal street gangs.
Now, how long did you say that you worked as an investigator in the gang unit?
I was since 2009, so 13 and a half, 14 years almost.
Would you tell the court what training and education that you acquired during that time that qualified you to work as an investigator with the gang unit?
And in the gang unit, when I first got to the gang unit, I actually was flown out to California to the California Gang Investigation Association, and I did a 28-hour course with them to learn about gangs. Because, of course, when I got to the gang unit, I had no training or experience in gangs, even though, you know, I policed in Zone 3 as a patrolman, and as an investigator. But once I got to the gang unit, I had no gang training, so I did that. I went to Miami to Project Safe Neighborhood gang training. I did gang training around the state as far as like different counties like Cobb, maybe Gwinnett, some training like that, and some training at the Atlanta Police Department.
What training did you receive first at California, where you received a 28-hour course, and then next talk about the training that you received in Project Safe Neighborhood in Miami?
In California, it was basic gang identification, basic gang awareness. Like I learned what, you know, different sign symbols that the different traditional gangs used out in California. It was like a block on the Mexican Mafia. They flew a guy in that was actual informant for the I guess the department out there, and he talked to us about the Mexican Mafia and their operations. We also talked about motorcycle gangs and just basic, like I said, gang identification.
Okay. And what about in Miami?
In Miami, it was more like a prevention type. It was more like a gang prevention type training. Like it was also, you know, identification, but the Project Safe Neighborhood was more on like intervention.
Okay. During the entire time that you have worked as an investigator, have you maintained training on criminal street gang identification and investigations?
Yes, like I said, over the years, over the past 13, 14 years, I've taken some kind of gang training, maybe every year. In 2011, I decided I wanted to be a gang instructor. So I went and got my post-instructor certification with the Atlanta Police Department, and I was able to start teaching gang classes where I taught, I teach now, I still do it. I teach police recruits a 4-hour block on organized crime and gang investigations. I have taught several other groups at the police department, like the Atlanta Police Background and Recruitment Unit, so they'll know what to look for when they're hiring people off the street to make sure they're not gang members. I've taught the Atlanta Fire recruits. I've taught the block captains here in the city of Atlanta about gang awareness. So I do a lot of teaching, so it kind of helps me with my training as well, because a lot of times when I'm researching on what to teach, I'm steady learning.
So what was required to attain the certification as a post-gang instructor?
It was an 80-hour class, the worst class I've ever taken in my life, the hardest. It was harder than college, by far. Had to, the first week we did a written test. We had to know all the basic, knowledge on presenting a class. And then the second week we had to write a lesson plan, which was challenging. And then I had never did public speaking, so the third week we had to do public speaking, and I was a wreck, but I got through it. It was, like I said, that was the hardest class that I had taken, and at that time my brother had a stroke, and I was going through a lot, but I ended up passing the class anyway.
And what types of things were taught as a part of that class that you later had to take that test on?
It was how to, public speaking, pretty much, how to present the actual information to a group, and just, basic instructor, how to, put together a PowerPoint, to,
Okay.
That kind of stuff.
As part of your gang training, are you taught to identify the ways to detect when crimes are committed in furtherance of a particular street gang?
Yes, well, I kind of did my own research and learning. Like I said, when I got to the gang unit, I had no clue what I was doing, but I learned, and I kind of went by the statute. Like, the statute kind of spells out how you're supposed to prosecute a gang member, and just I was an investigator prior to being a gang investigator, and I did a lot of carjackings. I investigated a lot of carjackings, a lot of assaults, stuff that gang members did anyway. So it kind of came easier for me because I noticed that those crimes were a group instead of the individuals like I was used to in the zone. Okay. So just pretty much, I already knew how to investigate it, just had to put the gang piece with it. Okay. And did you utilize only formal training to learn about the criminal street gang activity that you were investigating, or were other methods available to you, social media, jail calls, or anything of that sort? Yes, like I said, I was already an investigator, so the stuff like listening to jail calls, looking at social media, looking at phone records, tower dumps, what have you. It helped me, learn how to, like I said, put the gang piece with a regular investigation. And at the time when I first started, the gang unit in Atlanta, we were experiencing a lot of smash and grabs. And I had never pretty much investigated a smash and grab burglary. And my first time was at the gang unit when there was multiple perpetrators driving cars in the vehicles, running in, grabbing blue jeans, grabbing TVs or cigarillos or what have you. So I learned how to, investigate it from a burglary perspective, but then once it was multiple perps, that's when the gang portion came into play. I'm going to show you what I've already marked as State's Exhibit 4 and State's Exhibit 4B. State's Exhibit 4, for the purposes of the record, Your Honor, being the curriculum vitae of Investigator Underwood, and State's Exhibit 4B being a summary of her post-training, and ask you if you recognize State's Exhibit 4 and State's Exhibit 4B. Yes. Would you take a look at it and tell me, as to State's Exhibit 4, is that an accurate reflection of the resume you provided to the state? It is. And do you see any material alterations? I do not. And as to State's Exhibit 4B, as in Bravo, is that an accurate reflection of your post-training as you've provided it to the state? It is.
Do you see any material alterations?
I do not.
Your Honor, the state tenders State's Exhibit 4 and State's Exhibit 4 Bravo at this time.
Any objection for purposes of the purposes of the motion? Perhaps, Mr. Lewis. All right. States 4 and 4 are part.
Thank you, Your Honor. Investigator Underwood, how many gang investigations have you either led or been a part of during your time as a law enforcement officer?
I say 50 or 60 possibly, but we do a lot of joint investigations, so it can be upward to close to 100, and I was there 14 years.
Okay. And the 50 or 60, are those the ones that you directly participated in, or does that include the ones that you aided in and gave assistance on?
Both. It's both the ones I participated in and the ones I led.
And the up to 100, what was that number representative of?
The joint ones, like it's assisting other agencies, assisting homicide at Atlanta Police Department, assisting the ag assault unit, assisting the robbery unit, anybody that needed any kind of assistance with their cases if they were gang related.
Now, did it automatically, was it automatically known to, say, a responding officer or homicide or the robbery unit that a crime is gang related when it is committed and first responded to? Or did you all always go in knowing, yes, this is a gang crime?
No, at the police department, the gang unit is pretty much separate. We're our own unit. So I can say a regular investigator or a regular officer that's outside of the gang unit, they might not know the characteristics of a gang crime. They might not know what to look for. I remember my first year in the gang unit, I had a homicide I was asked to assist with because the victim had a red bandana tied in his belt loop. So the ordinary homicide investigator looking at that, he can see that it's a red bandana, but he didn't really know that it was a characteristic of a blood gang member. So they would kind of bring us in when they suspect that it might be gang related. And like my unit, we would know what to look for on the scene or with the victim or in the car or stuff like that.
And what types of things would you look for on the scene, in the car, or on the victim to tell you, hey, this is a gang crime, perhaps?
We, like I said, we look at the victim. A lot of time, tattoos is the first characteristic that we may notice. That same victim that had the red bandana through his belt loops, he also had blood tattoos on his body. So we get to a crime scene, we might see tattoos. We might see the bandanas, what they call rags. We might see Bibles in the car, which are, used by gang members to write their, I always call them SOPs, the same as we have at the police department, their standard operating procedures. We might see in the house, it might be a mural on the wall, paying homage to a gang or paying homage to the neighborhood or whatever the name of the gang might be on the wall. So a lot of that stuff, an ordinary investigator or ordinary officer might not look at it and just grasp real quick that it's gang related, which we will because we have been trained to identify that stuff.
Did any of the identifiers include significance of perhaps placement of items or articles on the body and colors and which side those colors were placed on? Or anything of that nature?
Yes, the Bloods, of course, the right side, they'll represent everything on the right side or wear their bandana on the right side, maybe in the Crips and maybe the folk gangs, like GDs would be the opposite on the left side, and their colors are different. We know the Bloods, the color red is significant for them. The number 5 is significant for them because they are, people nation, so they rep the 5. They rep the 5-point star. On the other hand, my Crips, they're gonna rep the 6-point star. They're gonna rep the color blue. They're gonna pay homage to the number 6 because 6 is, folk number. And the GDs are pretty much the same as the Crips. They're gonna rep the 6-point star. They're gonna do the color black mostly, sometimes blue. But the folk nation gangs and the people nation gangs, they're separate and they have different identifiers for.
Did all of your information on gang identification, cultures and practice come only from your formal training and education and jail calls, or did any of it come from other sources, people sources or things of that nature?
Yes, on my CV, as you see, I was a school resource officer for a number of years, and I would come in contact with a lot of gang members at the Atlanta Public Schools. And I will always build a rapport or a relationship with my students because I was more of try to be a mentee than, the police. I try to be, cordial with them and talk.
Hey Georgia, looking for quality, affordable health insurance? At georgiaaccess.gov, there are many great ways to find a plan that meets your needs and budget. Open enrollment begins November 1st. Georgia Access. Your health, your way.
Admit their affiliation, or they'll let you know, yeah, these are our colors, these, that kind of stuff. So I learned a lot from actual gang members.
How many actual gang members would you say you've interacted with during the course of your career as a law enforcement officer?
Hundreds, because like I said, I've been doing gang stuff since 2009, so hundreds.
And would that always include, would that always involve someone that you are charging with criminal street gang activity?
No, it could be just, like you said, ordinary contact situation at the school, I used to work the football games at Grady High School or at Lakewood Stadium or whatever. So I would come in contact with kids there, or even just like you said, going out doing field interviews, just talking to people in the community. We can get information that way, just doing interviews.
And how long did you work as a school resource officer with the Atlanta public school system?
A long time. Let me look at the dates I put on here.
Is 2004 to 2013 accurate as reflected on your resume?
Yes, it was a long time. So whenever Atlanta Public School decided to start their own police department, I stopped right then.
Okay. You mentioned that you would talk with children who were involved in gangs in the school system?
Yes.
Did I hear you say that correctly?
Yes, I used to, like I said, I worked as a resource officer, but I would get calls to the school where I had 12-year-olds and 11-year-olds. I had 8-year-olds jumping each other in the bathroom at one elementary school. I had a 14-year-old that was doodling Gangster Disciple on his notebook, and a teacher walked by and saw it. And so she notified the school resource officer, who called me. And I went to the school and I actually interviewed the kid, and he actually told me, well, yes, ma'am, I'm a gangster disciple. My daddy a gangster disciple. They just drove me to Alabama and blessed me in. So those kind of situations and interactions I had. And at the time, it was, like you said, it's not against the law to be in a gang. So all I could do is document that kid as a gang member. And on the other hand, I went to a middle school, a separate middle school in Atlanta, and I had a 12-year-old who was saying that he was 30 deep, and at the time, back early, like 2010, 2011, doing a trial. And I interviewed him as well. And he would say stuff like, well, I know I asked him, was he in a gang? He was like, well, I don't know. He was like, my mama don't want me to be in a gang, but my daddy do. And he was like, and I don't know what I want to do because I'm getting pulled in different directions. He was like, I live with my mom, but I go visit my dad on Camilton Road every other weekend. So, those are the kind of interactions that I had. And then years later, that same kid had a shooting. He was involved in a shooting at Thurl High School, where he was charged with shooting 5 kids at Thurl High School right outside. So he listened to, I guess, his dad instead of his mom about the being in the gang. But those kind of memories I have of dealing with kids over the years that struggle with whether or not they want to be a gang member or not.
I heard you mention phrases like jumping each other in and blessing me in.
Right.
Are these phrases that are used just in normal everyday speech, or do they have some kind of significance? Because I'm thinking blessing, prayers.
Yeah, that's gang terminology for joining the gang. Like this, it's like 3 ways that we know of that members join. They can actually get beat in, where they fight for a set amount of time. For an example, 9 Trey Bloods have to fight for 31 seconds because October 31st is the date that they started up on Rikers Island up in New York. So they will actually fight for 31 seconds or get jumped on by the gang for 31 seconds to get in. So that's beat in. You got members that can get sexed in, and you got members that get blessed in. Blessed in is when maybe my father or my mother or somebody in my family is a bloodline of gang members. So I don't have to put in work. I don't have to get sexed in, blessed in, jumped in. I'm automatically in the gang because of my lineage or my family history.
Are those ways of joining a gang, are they unique to, and is there a different kind of gang than a traditional criminal street gang?
It's we do have non-traditional criminal street gangs, or I call them hybrid gangs.
Okay.
So yeah, it's different from. And actually, that's what, when I first started the gang unit in 2009, that's all I saw. That's all I investigated, because I grew up here in Atlanta, and I was one of those people that pretty much thought we don't have gangs here. Atlanta's not a gang city, and I remember us having like robbing crews back in the day when the crack epidemic hit in the 80s. I remember us having different neighborhood like crews, that drug crews, and like I Refuse Posse, or Down by Law. Like I Refuse Posse, I grew up with Arthur Powell, who served 11 years as a gang member, and now he's trying to, get kids not to join gangs. But I can remember being at Harper High School, and Down by Law came up to the school looking for rivals at the time, and actually broke one of our glasses, our doors at the school. So, like I said, I didn't feel like we had gangs, but it kind of opened my eyes once I got to the gang unit, and I saw that we had all these non-traditional hybrid neighborhood sets. Like every single housing project in Atlanta had a hybrid gang or a non-traditional gang.
And so was it your experience and your training and your education that you received during the time you worked as an investigator that allowed you to see things that you were not able to see prior to gaining that experience?
Yes.
Okay. Now, prior to working as a gang investigator with the City of Atlanta Police Department, did you have any other positions within that department?
Not within Atlanta, yes. Atlanta, but prior to the gang unit, I was at licensing permits.
Okay.
I only did that maybe a couple of years, and around that time that I went to the gang unit, I wouldn't say recruited, but I was voluntold that I was going to the gang unit, and because I was doing licensing permits and I was enjoying it, but I was able to go over and learn something new. But prior to licensing permits, I was investigating Zone 3 CID, Criminal Investigations Division. That's why I did the investigations of the shootings, the carjackings, the armed robberies, burglaries, pretty much the violent crime.
What part of the city does Zone 3 encompass?
Mostly like Zone 3, mostly like southwest of Atlanta, southeast of Atlanta. My beat was actually on Metropolitan Parkway all the way down to Cleveland, which is 308's beat. I did everything, I guess you could say, south of Deal Avenue. I also, when I was in Zone 3, I actually had to assist other beats next to me, so I did go to Cleveland Avenue. I went to Thomasville, I went to Jonesboro South, I went to Mechanicsville, which was McDaniel Glen. So I worked Zone 3 most of my career, which is like, gang unit most of my career, but as a patrolman most of my career, I stayed out there about 8 years.
What gangs have you investigated in the city of Atlanta?
Ooh.
How many gangs? Start with you.
Several, but back, like I can name the hybrids. It was 30 Deep was like the main one that was driving the crime when I came to the gang unit. MDC, Most Dangerous Clique, out of Bourne Homes Housing Project. We had YMM, Young Money Makers, out of 2500 Center Street. We had Bank First Play Later out of Oakland City. We had Rock Crew from Cleveland Avenue. We had Capitol Homes had one, I can't remember, it escapes me right now, but it was several, every single housing. I remember Red Cartel was from Gilbert Gardens. So it was several hybrids that I did investigate when I first came to the gang unit. And my years as an investigator, I saw the gang life in Atlanta evolve and change. I saw where all of my non-traditional hybrids, they actually aligned themselves with traditional gangs. Like somebody from New York or New Jersey drove or flew down here and organized the 9 Trey, Bloods. Somebody came down, organized the Sex, Money, Murder Bloods, but they organized the hybrids. Like, for example, who do we have over in the West End? I had can't remember which gang in the West End, but the West End, there's mainly 9 Trey. Okay. I know for a fact my Thomasville Crips, my Young Gunner Crew Crips, were organized by the neighborhood Rolling 60 Crips, which Big U from LA caught a plane, came out here to Thomasville and actually organized the Young Gunner Crew Crips. They're now neighborhood Rolling 60s. I had Inglewood Family, Gangster Bloods, fly from the West Coast to Summerhill, and they organized the Atlanta Blood Gang. So, and then we had Sex, Money, Murder go to Cleveland Avenue and organize Rock Crew, some of the YSL members.
Okay. You mentioned YSL members. Have you had occasions to investigate crimes involving YSL?
Yes.
All right. Have you had an opportunity to talk with associates and members, self-professed members of YSL?
Yes.
And have you gained information through the sources that you've mentioned earlier regarding YSL and their culture and practices?
I have.
All right. Are you able to give a number for how many YSL cases that you've investigated in the city of Atlanta?
Well, I left on my CV, you can see that I was a task force officer at the ATF for a number of years, from 2013 to 2020 when we were pulled off the task force. While I was over there, I think that was closely around the time that Rock Crew kind of changed or evolved into YSL. So most of my investigations that I did on that particular gang, Rock Crew, was prior to me going to be a federal task force officer. Okay. So I would be more familiar with the Rock Crew side of things than the YSL. I did assist in the 2015 gang war investigation, okay, where YSL and YFN, Inglewood Family, were in a gang war. Okay. And I assisted from the task force.
Did you get or gain information through your participation with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms as a task force officer? Did you have access to resources that informed your knowledge and experience as it relates to gangs? Yes.
Once I was assigned, I actually went over there. I was volunteered to go over to ATF as well. But once I got over there, and the deal was that if I was enjoying working gangs, but the deal from my major at the time was if you go over there, guess what? You can still work gangs. You just got to work guns as well. Okay. So my focus when I got to ATF was to actually target gang members with guns, okay, and the violent repeat offenders. Okay. So once I got over there, the cases that I made at ATF were actually gang members who were violent repeat offenders.
Would you tell the court how many hours of gang training that you have received during the course of your time as a law enforcement officer?
Over 100 hours.
And are those listed on State's Exhibit 4B?
Yes.
All right. Would you give the court a sampling of the training that you have received that would not have been available to members of the general public?
Like I said, the California gang investigation training that I have gone to, I've gone to training at GGIA, which is pretty much for just law enforcement or attorneys only, or the prosecution rather. Gang awareness, and the intel meetings that we would go to. It was primarily law enforcement officers, but the intel meetings we would get credit for training because we would actually discuss gang trends, discuss the kind of crimes that were occurring in whatever jurisdiction we went to have the meeting. So the gang identification, the gang awareness, like I say, I'm an instructor, so I have to talk about that stuff that, when I teach about how gangs in Atlanta have evolved, like I was telling you. So, and I have to stay up on the trends just to put that information back out to whoever I'm teaching.
Okay. How would you come to interact with gang members that you were not arresting or investigating for a particular crime. Were there any instances where you would just go up on a scene, do a knock and talk, and just speak freely with people on a scene about a particular group of people?
Yes, a lot of times we wasn't just, sitting in the office. We would get out and actually meet and greet, who we were, trying to identify maybe, or if we were trying to get information. I've done a lot of knock and talks or canvasses in the neighborhood. If it's something's going on in a particular neighborhood, we can walk around and talk to different, people in the neighborhood. And sometimes you'll run up on a gang member, you don't even know that that's the person that lived there, but, they don't have to be under arrest or under investigation just for me to talk to them, because, like you say, you get more with sugar than with vinegar. So you honey honey than vinegar. So you try to talk to people and be nice to people and treat people like treat people, and you'll get a lot of information just by being who you are, and and they call you auntie, and then you move on to the next.
You mentioned Rock Crew. What is that?
Based on Cleveland.
When did you first have an awareness of Rock Crew?
When I came to the gang unit in 2009.
Okay. Now, were you investigating a particular case, or how did you come to learn about that group?
I remember, it's been a long time, but I do remember smash and grabs being a thing back then, and but the Rock Crew, it's like each gang have their own little niche of what they do. Because I remember Fam America making fun of 30 Deep before doing only smash and grabs. But at the time when I first started, Rock Crew was still in ATMs, and they were tearing us up. So I knew that they hung out at 108 Cleveland Avenue. And I told my supervisor at the time, we need to go do a shakedown pretty much at 108 Cleveland to try to figure out where these ATMs going. Because I know from the intel we was gathering, from the evidence we gathered as far as the recovery locations of the ATMs, we knew that, that Rock Crew members were involved. So one day we decided to go to 108 Cleveland because of me. And I told Sarge, let's go out there and tell them ain't nobody selling no. Can I cuss, Judge?
Sure.
Ain't nobody selling no ass. Ain't nobody selling no drugs. Ain't nobody selling nothing. Ain't nothing going down out here. We're going to be out here every day in y'all's face until I get my ATMs. Because I know that they are being hidden over here. And so at the time, I think we arrested like 3 members because somebody had a warrant. I think we might have arrested Mr. Williams that day, and I can't remember what it was for, but it was probably some minor. But later on that day, around 5 o'clock, somebody called the DEA and said, I want to leave a tip. All the ATMs are in a house on Glen Rose Circle. So we were still at work. I went back to the house on Glen Rose Circle. It was like a vacant house, had 8 ATMs in one house. I had to call a wrecker to actually get the ATMs towed from that location to evidence down at police headquarters. But all of the ATMs had been cut open. Of course, all the money had been removed. But I can remember looking at videos back then where we would see 8 people go and steal an ATM at one time. They would back a pickup truck, have a hand truck. They were organized, and they were stealing ATMs left and right. And we did arrest a couple of the Rock Crew members, or I can't even remember if they was YSL at the time, but I think it was Rock Crew members for ATM theft.
When you did come across someone that you spoke with that gave you information about an alleged street gang or criminal street gang activity, did you attempt to corroborate it or debunk it, or did you just take it at face value as fact?
Oh no, I'm the kind of person, I try to be thorough, and I don't just take a person's word for it. You could tell me something, but I'm gonna go and do my own investigation. So that's what I've always done. If I get information, I'm gonna dig and dig and dig until I can feel comfortable that it's fact. So I don't just take somebody's word. I go above and beyond to try to prove or disprove.
So you mentioned you could not remember whether the Rock Crew members that you had investigated had become YSL. What do you know about the evolution of the group called YSL?
From what I understand, like I said, I was at ATF, but I think around that time,
Objection.
Hold on one second.
Basic.
I apologize. Detective Underwood has already testified that she was transferred. She was hooked into ATM. She does not know about YSL.
She did not testify that she does not know about.
That's your objection, Mr. Steele. I'm going to overrule it at this point in time.
But
Okay?
I asked for a foundation. Don't mind.
All right. Madam?
Thank you, Judge. Would you tell the court whether or not during the course of your career as an investigator with the City of Atlanta Police Department and a task force agent with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, whether or not you were able to gather any information and education that would tell you about the evolution of a group called YSL?
Yes, when I went to ATF, I kept my same cubicle that I actually sit in today, where they moved me to another office, but it's pretty much the same cubicle I've had for 14 years. And what I did was I spent the first half of my day at ATF, and every evening, because I live south, I would come and sit in my cube and work from APD. So just because I was at ATF don't mean that I disconnected from APD. I was probably one of the only TFOs that spent more of the time at APD, because I think I liked the, gang unit there at APD better than I did up as a task force officer. And plus it was further away, but I didn't disconnect. So I did keep my knowledge, training, experience about the different trends. Like I said, I saw the evolution of how my hybrid gangs here in the city evolved into traditional gangs. So, and like I said, I was a part of the 2015 investigation where we had the gang war.
Okay. Did the investigations that you conducted involving social media, interviews that you described, include things like listening to jail calls?
Let me object to the form of the question suggesting the answers.
I'll rephrase, Your Honor. You're welcome.
Go ahead.
I'll rephrase. Would you explain to the court the areas that you were able to gain knowledge from through your time as a task force officer or TFO and an investigator with the gang unit? That educated you as to YSL and its evolution?
Well, like I said, I still had access to our APIN files. So if anybody else in the unit had an investigation, I had access to that. I also, like I said, I would keep up with it for myself, because I was actually teaching still. Even though I was a task force officer, I was still a post-certified instructor. So I would have to leave my TFO job and go to the academy and teach. So I kept up with the trends and, like I said, the evolution. I kept up with what was going on with the inner workings of the gangs in Atlanta. And if it was a hot gang at the time and it brought attention to that gang, of course I was a part of it as well.
How did you keep up with the trends and the evolutions?
I would keep up with, like you said, do the investigations with the other, even though I was away from APD, I still would come back in the evenings and I would still talk to the other investigations like Belknap or Dennis and Gaither and whoever was in the gang unit at the time. We would all do pretty much investigations together, or we would help each other out on each other's investigations. So I would do interviews still. I would still do, listen to jail calls. Even at my desk at ATF, I had access to the Fulton County jail calls. I had a friend that worked with us that's now he's a SAC at the Department of Corrections. So I would get a lot of information for the Department of Corrections. At the time, Investigator Viverito was at probation, and we worked hand in hand on a lot of cases, because she would also help me with, my investigations. If I had a target that was on probation, she would help me, even if, it was on her caseload, or if it was not on her caseload, she would still help me. So just actually working with everybody else, doing my own thing is, on my own too, but just the basic investigations like the jail calls, the social media dumps, the interviews, interrogations, what have you.
When you said if a gang was hot or if a group was hot? What is that? What does
I mean, they were the ones striking, like that example I gave of my ATMs and my rock crew. 30 Deep was hot at one time. I remember locking up 11 members at one time because they had just did a smash and grab where they hit 2 locations, so they were hot. And we knew they were hot, and they put me on morning watch, meaning I had to work from 11 at night to 7 in the morning because they were tearing us up on smash and grabs. And we have to go where the crime is, so I had to go to morning watch and, you know, work all night. But one particular night, I had 2 smash and grabs, and we suspected it was 30 Deep. And it was a car that was used in the crime that was abandoned on some railroad tracks over off of Deal Avenue. And at that time, that officer knew his beat. He knew the actual gang members or perpetrators in his neighborhood, on his beat. And he told me, a resident, that I needed to go check out at, it was actually 712 Deal Avenue. And so I called my Sarge again. I was like, hey, Sarge, I need to do a knock and talk. It was like 4 o'clock in the morning, and it was raining outside, and I knew that these smash and grabs had just happened. So he was like, cool. So I went and did a knock and talk. Mother answered the door, and of course I had 11 or 12 gang members in the house at that time. As soon as I walked in the door, I saw evidence of the crime. I held the scene, got a search warrant. The other unit came, the other units from the gang unit came to help me. And that particular night, we locked up 11 members of 30 Deep for smash and grab for 2 different locations.
Did your law enforcement training that you received as a post-certified law enforcement officer, how many hours of law enforcement training in general have you received?
Yeah, I think we've already got that.
I'll move on. Thank you, Your Honor.
Standing objection.
And where did you go to college?
I actually started out at Georgia Military College. I got my associates there, and I actually finished up at Columbia Southern University for my bachelor's.
In what area?
In criminal justice.
All right. Have you been involved in or testified as a part of any gang cases in Fulton County?
Yes.
What cases?
I did the actual Jonathan Redden, aka G-Dog, murder case back in 2011. I think it was 2010. I did the...
What gang was involved in that?
I'm sorry. That was a 30 Deep trial for the Standard murder. It was a murder at a bar here in Atlanta that was really, really popular. I did a D'Amico Jones. He was a Goodfellas member. I did that trial. I did the D'Angelo Tucker, who was actually a sex money murder gang member that turned into a Goodfella member. And I did, the most recently was my Cordarius Dorsey sex money murder case. I did a case over at federal court when I was a task force officer for a Fam America case. I assisted in DeKalb County in magistrate court on a 30 Deep smash and grab because, gangs don't have jurisdictional lines like we do, and they actually hit a pawn shop down on Moreland Avenue, which happened to sit in DeKalb. And I knew all of the players who had done the smash and grab, so DeKalb asked me to assist, and I had to go to magistrate as the gang expert on that case.
Have you been qualified as an expert in any court cases in the state of Georgia?
Yes, in federal court in Fulton County and in DeKalb.
Do you know how many times?
At least 10, maybe 12.
Okay. And based on the training, education, experience, and background that you have in criminal street gangs and criminal street gang activity, do you have an opinion about whether the group called YSL or Young Slime Life is a criminal street gang?
Yes, YSL is a criminal street gang.
Here, respond for our ruling.
Your Honor, we're asking for her opinion, and we're asking for her to give the court her opinion as it relates to...
Overrule the objection, Mr. Steele.
I'm sorry, could you repeat? Do you have an opinion as to whether or not the group called YSL or Young Slime Life is a criminal street gang?
Yes, according to the Georgia statute 1615-3, the definition of criminal street gang, YSL does fit the definition of criminal street gang.
And based on, is your opinion based on the education, training, and experience that you've relayed to the court?
Yes.
All right. And you mentioned being involved in the activities as they occurred in 2015 regarding YSL. Do you have an opinion as to whether or not those actions were properly categorized as criminal street gang activity?
Yes.
Object to the properly categorized.
I stand as the form. Why don't you rephrase?
Thank you, Your Honor. Do you have an opinion as to whether or not the crimes that you mentioned in 2015 regarding YSL? And to be clear, would you describe some of those crimes to the court that you referred to when you speak of the crimes in 2015?
In 2015, we had a gang war where every morning when we came to work, it was 40, 50, 80, sometimes 100 shell casings in front of somebody's house. Or we had people shot, innocent people shot around that time. We had innocent people killed. We had, you know, like I said, the drive-bys, the fights, the car chases with the police, we had members of certain gangs retaliating because, it was ticket for tat. They were going back and forth.
What gangs?
It was actually YSL and Inglewood Family Bloods.
Okay.
The Inglewood Family Blood member house gets shot up. Then a few minutes later, a YSL family member's house was shot up. So this went back and forth for months, and we had to end up trying to actually put together something like this, like a RICO back then, but we didn't get it going like we wanted to. We actually did federal cases because I actually sent one of the Inglewood family members to prison on a federal charge. But we actually, worked it as a group. We ended up calling, like on the federal side, we do operations. So we had operation planners where myself, Investigator Dennis, Investigator Gaither, we had Investigator Belknap, who was a part of the U.S. Marshals Task Force. He helped out. We had my partner at the time at ATF was a special agent, Tyra. She was my partner. She helped out. We had ATF actually special agents helping out with this investigation. So we all kind of came together. We knew we had a problem in the city because at that time, these two gangs were driving the crime in the city of Atlanta, and they were fighting each other, like I said, and they was killing innocent people. So we came together, tried to come up with a plan, and what we did was kind of just started picking them off one by one. We would actually charge who we could charge if somebody was on probation or if somebody was a felon and we caught them with a gun, that kind of stuff. We used that as a tool to stop the violence. And we were successful as far as stopping the violence for a little while, and then it'll spike back again, and then we'll lock somebody else up, and then it'll stop. So, our tools that we used to actually combat that crime at the time, we did what we could with what we had.
Based on your knowledge, background, training, education, and experience, were those crimes that you just described as a part of the back and forth or the war between YSL and Inglewood family, were those crimes criminal street gang activity?
Yes.
You spoke about Rock Crew.
Mm-hmm.
Was Rock Crew a group that consisted of?
I stand the question as a form. Just rephrase it.
Yes, Your Honor. Based on your training, experience, education, and background, do you have an opinion as to whether or not Rock Crew, as you described it, was a criminal street gang?
Yes.
And in your opinion, was Rock Crew a criminal street gang?
Yes.
All right. Your Honor, at this time, we tender Investigator Underwood as an expert in the field of criminal street gangs, as well as Atlanta criminal street gang trends, cultures, and practices, as well as YSL, criminal street gang in particular, and Rock Crew, or Raised on Cleveland criminal street gang in particular.
All right, thank you, madam.
Thank you, Judge.
Okay, Cross. Mr. Steele?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
When you testified in the Famerica case that you talked about in federal court, were you qualified as an expert?
Yes.
Do you remember what year that was?
It was before I left, so it might have been like around maybe 18, maybe 17, 18, something like that.
Do you remember if you wrote a report in that case?
I did not. It was actually to help out another special agent that was prosecuting a Fam America member. And it was a Fam America gang member that had, I think, gang paraphernalia or something like that. And they just wanted me to actually come to court to speak on that. And that, you know, just to testify about the gang itself and about the member actually being a member of that person being a member of that gang.
Okay. Have you ever written a report in any of the times that you were qualified and testified as an expert in the case?
If I wrote a report, it had to be that I was actually a part of the investigation. I might have wrote a report then, but I don't write reports just because I testify in a case.
Yes, so my question was inarticulate, and you were right. I'm targeting a report of your background, of your premise, of how the foundation of your opinions, what your opinions are, that type of expert report.
No, I've never written the report. I just get on the stand and actually testify to the actual gang or the individual.
How do you become a member of the Georgia Gang Investigators Association? How did you become a member?
I heard about it when I first started back in 2009, and you just go online. You can go online and just submit request an application, I think, or you just fill out the information online. But it's been so long, but I remember going to different meetings, like I said, up in Gwinnett, and I think I heard about it in Gwinnett, and somebody was like, well, you need to join, and I ended up paying the $25 and joined. Because it's like $25 a year or something like that, and I joined. And I've been a member the whole time, kind of off and on, but I've never actually been to one of the conferences, but I have gone to their trainings.
Okay. So could someone like me who's not law enforcement pay the $25 and become a member?
I think it's just for prosecutors. If you're a prosecutor, you probably could, but just I think it's just law enforcement officers and prosecutors and maybe like investigators from the DA's office, and you know, it's just for law enforcement, I think.
Okay. Now, Detective Underwood, you said earlier that it is not against the law to be in a gang or to be affiliated with a gang, something like that. Is that accurate? That's
accurate.
Okay. And that's why I think you said that when you were talking about the, I wrote down 12-year-old child with a disciple.
Yes, and he was 14. That kid was 14. The other one that I talked to about the mama and the daddy situation, he was 12.
Okay. Okay. So if you have in your understanding of the law and your expertise for this honorable court to decide whether to qualify you as an expert in the categories that the honorable district attorney asked, if a person is a member or an associate, I guess either one, of a gang and have tattoos, the bandanas you talked about, the wall display, pay homage to a gang, I'm just using your words earlier.
Okay.
Is any of that illegal?
No.
So it becomes illegal when?
Criminal gang activity, when that particular member commits the act of criminal gang activity.
So the demarcation, to use that word, if that's a good word with you, is you become an associate of a gang or a member of a gang. You have, I'm walking around with the tattoo and the bandana and the wall hanging, the wall displays, but I am not breaking the law. But if I go out and commit a crime that's in furtherance of the gang, you need the nexus, right?
Yes.
Okay. Then that's what you say now, Brian, you have, you violated the law. Now, Brian, you violated the law.
Yes.
Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what if I cheer on the gang? Like I have posters, I love I love the Bloods. It's a great way of life. Is that a problem?
That's not a problem. It's not against the law.
So, okay, you're talking about freedom of
That's for
association.
the law, yeah. It depends on,
Okay. I think I understand. So you're talking about freedom of association, freedom of speech. It's the crime connected to the
Yes,
gang.
it's the crime. If you can be a member your whole life and not commit a crime. There's some out there that just a member, they just want to be a part of something and they just want to be, but they're afraid to probably actually go out and commit crimes because they don't want to go to prison or what have you. Because it is gang members that's never been to prison, never been arrested. But when they go out and actually commit a crime, that's when it's a problem, when they come across my desk and I have to, charge them for being a gang member.
Let me ask you this then. Is it just any crime? Let's say I go home and my wife is in bed with another man, naked, and I lose my mind and I pull out my gun from my drawer and I kill that person. They didn't do anything to me. But I'm the same person I just described. I'm tattooed with bloods. I'm carrying the blood signs. I have my walls bloods. Is the fact I committed the homicide, is that now a gang activity?
Not if you're doing it out of just out of the fact that it's your wife and she's sleeping with another man and that's the reason why you're doing it. That's not on behalf of the gang. That's your own personal feelings about what just happened that caused you to commit that murder. So no, that wouldn't be criminal gang activity.
And what do you use personally? What do you use to decide whether it is criminal street gang activity?
I go by the actual statute where it has a different, crimes actually listed. It had even simple battery, like at a school. If I go to a high school and it's 13 girls in a fight and it might be 8 against 5 or what have you, if they are part of a gang, I can actually use just a simple battery fight. I can use the charge of criminal street gang activity or participation in criminal street gang activity. Most of the times, though, it's like the violent crimes, like the carjackings, the robberies, the smashing and grabs when they're driving vehicles through buildings, stealing blue jeans, just aggravated assault shootings like we had with the gang war when they were shooting up, each other's houses. That would be considered criminal gang activity. And it's like listed in our statute under 1615.3. I think that's under all the definitions, it kind of goes back to criminal gang activity and what that means. And then it goes back to the certain crimes that we should look at when we go to charge somebody.
And I understand there's statutory specified crimes.
Yes.
But let's say I'm the same person. I'm wearing my tattoo of the Bloods and my colors and wall hangings, and I'm petitioning Bloods are the great way of life. I'm on social media. I love the Bloods. I'm doing hand signs, everything. And I'm selling oxycodone, illegally selling oxycodone. How do you decide whether I'm doing that to further the gang or if I'm doing that on my own personal crime, like the shooting of the person?
Do you pay dues?
I pay dues.
You pay dues. We can articulate that you're actually selling drugs and you're actually paying dues back into that gang. So it's pretty much that money that you're making, you're putting it back into the gang. So you are furthering the gang with the financial, your payments that you're putting in. So it's like you still like contributing to that gang, that money, that drug money.
Understood. Okay. If you know, and I didn't hear you talk about this, so just say I don't know. And I heard it differently, so I want to talk to you about YSL. Does YSL have colors? And if yes, what are they?
YSL to me is a non-traditional, but they actually use the colors of the actual traditional blood gangs. Like some of the YSL members are actually sex, money, murder members. Some of them are not. I do know that. But they actually still use the colors like the traditional blood gangs, like the color red. They do use the color green because they use the little green emojis, the little snake emojis on social media, what happens. So I only see like the red and green, but to me, they do the same symbols, like the 5-point stars, the number 5, the the letter B instead of C, and different words. So they I'm not gonna say emulate Bloods, but they use the same characteristics as Bloods.
Do you know why, and you may have just said it, and if you said it, just say, I just told you. Why is it the green and the red?
The red is for Bloods. The Bloods use the color red. And then the green are usually like for the emojis or the slime that they, talk about when they're posting, or they're actually glorifying whatever gang they're bragging about, whatever gang they're in, especially like on social. I see it mostly on social media, where I have seen some kind of graffiti somewhere too, but on social media you can see the little green snakes that they use for the YSL symbols or what have you.
How did you learn that, if you can sit here today and say, yeah, I remember how I learned? How did you learn about the green and the red colors?
I learned it just by looking at it and discussing it with other gang investigators. But a lot of these gang members tell on themselves. They post everything. They want to glorify their gangs so bad that they spell it out for you. They'll put it out on a poster board. Like you said, if you're holding up a poster saying, I love the Bloods, a lot of the gang members do that. They actually hold up posters on social media saying, I love the Bloods, I'm a Blood, I'm a Sex Money Murder Blood, I'm a Inglewood family Blood, what have you. They actually educate us on the stuff that they do on social media.
Okay. With regard, and you get that from your own views of social media as well as sharing it or learning about it through other coworkers?
Yes, because a lot of times when we do gather intel, we put it in our APIN files. So I can open up
I put it on
our APIN files.
Yes, I understand.
And say if I didn't know a gang member and his name popped up in maybe a suspect in a homicide, and I go to his profile, somebody else like Investigator Belknap or whoever might have actually put this person in. They enter this person, into our files, and they will actually have photographs from a crime scene that they might have investigated. So a lot of times I can go back and look into the files, and I learn about that person just because of what somebody else put in. So they'll document that person, and they'll document their tattoos maybe, or they'll document, or if they get a Bible, or like I call it, the SOPs from a gang, and they get it and they upload it into the files. I learned that way by reading, the actual information or documentation that's uploaded into the files.
The co-workers' work that is already being generated.
Exactly. I use that to learn as well.
Access to that.
Yes.
Is there that you remember, is there a YSL SOP / Bible?
Seemed like I've seen something come maybe from GGIA, or like GGIA does send out intel where they'll email the whole group stuff that they find, like it might have been the Department of Juvenile Justice or somebody, I can't remember, it might have been another jurisdiction. If they actually collect evidence or they collect, that kind of intel, they'll upload it and send it in an email to everybody.
How do you know that it's reliable, if you do know it's reliable?
It comes from like another agency, like a law enforcement agency.
But you just trust it because it's come from law enforcement?
Yes.
Do you know the background of where law enforcement got that from? Like a reliable person, a non-reliable person? And if you don't, just say, I don't know. I
don't know, but a lot of times law enforcement will take it just like how I would do on a scene. If I'm on a crime scene, or if I'm doing an investigation and I gather some kind of intel that I want to share with other agencies, then, the fact that, I guess I am who I am, they either take my word for it or they don't have to.
You mentioned, I believe, that you may have, my words, interrogated, spoken with, whatever the correct term is, people that you believe are YSL members or associates, and you use that information for today's testimony. Is that accurate? Did I write that down right? Have you spoken with people who...
Excuse me, can you reword the question? Yeah. I'm trying to follow you.
Okay, I think you said this earlier, but I'm just going to ask the question. Have you spoken with people who you believe are YSL associates or members?
I have.
Okay, and my rest of the question was about YSL.
Yes.
And whom are those persons?
I've actually spoken to Jeffrey Williams myself. I've spoken to Shannon myself. I've spoken to I guess I can call him Casey. I've spoken to him. I've spoken to Trantavia Stevens. I've spoken to a lot of the names escape me, but Terry Rivers. I locked Terry Rivers up for ATM theft, so I never forget him. But different. Over the years, it's been so many. And like I said, the fact that they evolved from Rock Crew to YSL, I did get, I have gotten to, speak to them. I think whenever we arrested Mr. Williams back in 2015, I went out to the mansion that day, and I wasn't, he was in custody, but we was just having casual conversation. It wasn't anything, derogatory or mean, or we was just we kind of got, how can I say this? We kind of got frowned upon from another jurisdiction because we were being nice to him. So, I've never had like a, bad relationship with him. If I saw, even when we went to 108 Cleveland, I got pissed off because another officer kind of chunked his phone away. I don't know if you remember that, but I got pissed off about that. So I've always liked to treat people like people. So, and the contact that I have had with him, because I remember him when he was a kid, like he was maybe been 16 or 17, he got shot down on Cleveland Avenue, and I was an investigator at the time. And I went to talk to him then. And a lot of times my interaction is not just, oh, you going to jail. My interaction can be, can you get out of this life? Can you do better? Can you stop doing this? Can you stop doing that? I be trying to be the mama and whooping them out of the gang, and some of them listen and some of them don't.
When was the 108 Cleveland Avenue incident that you talked about?
It had to be like around 11, maybe 2011, 2012. I would have to actually go look it up because it's not in front of me. But I do recall, like I said, the ATMs were like a thing in the city at the time. And I was serious about trying to find out where they were, and I did get them back that day. But I would actually have to research that and get back with you on the exact date because we did document that incident.
Okay. Now, was I wrong and I may have misheard, I thought you said that you were understanding and investigating Raised on Cleveland, Rock Crew, you said, but then you shifted your attention when about YSL. You were asked about how did it, I wrote down, listen, my notes may be wrong, but I wrote down not as familiar with YSL. Is that?
No, that's not what I said. I said that I remember Rock Crew kind of evolving into YSL, but that was around the time that all of the, like I said, my hybrid games or my non-traditional games were being traditionalized, if I can use that word. That was around the time that YSL Rock Crew kind of moved to YSL, the same time that Sex, Money, Murder Bloods came over to Cleveland Avenue and actually organized the Rock Crew members or the YSL members. But I'm not 100% sure, but it was some kind of split down too between Rock Crew because the actual leader of Rock Crew, which was Quentin Porter, his name came up in like a discovery package around that time, and it was like animosity, from what I understand, between him and Mr. Williams, and a lot of them kind of distanced themselves from actually Quentin Porter around that time, and that's around the time that I think YSL kind of took off and went their own separate way from Rock Crew.
Do you remember what the disagreement was that you're talking about?
Yes, I remember Quentin Porter, his name came up because it was a armed robbery on Cleveland Avenue at the barbershop where a famous basketball player was robbed by Rock Crew members. And from what I understand, maybe Quentin Porter might have cooperated, or he might have gave up some information, or it might have been another defendant that I had arrested on a separate case that had given information to Porter about where the jury was that was taken in the robbery from Crenton. Javaris Crenton is the guy I'm talking about. But after all of that was said and done, it's like it was a rift because street code is your name better not come up in a discovery package. That's just street code. That's street knowledge. Everybody in the streets, they frown upon you cooperating with the police. They frown upon you cooperating in any kind of investigation. They can be shot, laying there dying, and they're not gonna snitch on who shot them because of street code. So I think they frowned upon Quentin Porter because of that case, because they felt like he sold him out or he gave him up or what have you.
And that's the split from Rock Crew
Yes,
to YSL.
yes.
Okay. I don't believe I have any other questions except I'd like to ask you, you didn't talk about, I don't believe you talked about expressions or common terms. So I'm going to just give you a couple terms. If you don't know what they are, don't feel comfortable, just say that.
Okay.
Slime, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, that's a term that the Bloods use, and I don't think it's just sex, money, murder Bloods. I think Trey might use slime. I think it's just a blood terminology, just blood terminology.
What does it mean, if you know? And if you don't know, just say, I'm not familiar.
Well, from what I gather, you know, I guess my opinion, a lot of them use it as, you know, a term of endearment to each other.
Like friend?
Right. Like,
brother,
what's up,
sister.
slime? How you doing, slime?
Okay. How about a slat? Are you familiar with that?
Yes. Slat is slime love all the time. It's kind of like black. The Bloods use black, blood love all the time. So the slime people or the slime gang people will say slat instead of black.
And that again crosses different, I guess, gangs or generations.
I'm trying to remember, does any other, it might be other Blood gang members that scream slime, they might use slat too, but I can't. Don't quote me on that.
I won't quote you on anything. Did, well, that's not true. There's a transcript, so you're being quoted. Did either of these terms predate YSL, slime, slat, if you know?
No, because like I said, I've been doing this since 2009. I don't remember slat I don't remember Rock Crew screaming slat.
Okay. How about the other
I don't remember Rock Crew screaming slime either.
How about other associations that you mentioned that use those same?
Like like I said, I didn't really get to see traditional gangs here in Atlanta until the evolution. I did a detail. I can remember myself and Investigator Dabney years ago. We had to do a detail at Piedmont Park where we saw actually Hispanic gangs that were at the park, and it was like some. I can't remember which gang it was, but I remember they had on the blue. It might have been Serenos. We saw Serenos in person for the first time. That was like our first time actually seeing a traditional gang like back in 2009, because like I said, we didn't really have that we knew of traditional gangs that we had investigated or come in contact with or answered calls to or whatever. So when we saw them, we were kind of excited because we was like, oh, we in the gang, you know, we got to see real gangs, because like I said, back then, the Rock Crews, the MDCs, the YMM, the YGCs, all of those non-traditional gangs, they were not really looked upon as real gangs. Like I would go to juvenile court and try to prosecute LNGM, which was a non-traditional gang, and the juvenile court judge at the time didn't believe that those kids were actually gangs, because they felt like, oh, those kids just looked at YouTube videos and they emulating, you know, what they see on YouTube or on video, so they're not for real. But these gangs were still committing criminal gang activity. So in my eyes and in my prosecutions, they were actual real gangs.
3 or more people.
Right, and they were actually getting together and committing crimes like the smash and grabs, the robberies, the carjackings, the murders. The standard was like back in 2010. That was gang related all day.
Do you know what I'm talking about? Wipe the nose, go like that with your finger.
Slime.
What does that mean?
That's just I think what do you call it? I ain't gonna call it a moniker, but it's just like a movement that the gangs are a hand sign. You could call it a hand sign because they're using their hands, that blood gangs do.
And does that also transcend YSL, if YSL uses that?
I have seen YSL members do it, maybe on social media.
How about
on videos?
Other persons too? Not?
Maybe other blood gangs, maybe.
Okay. And is anything, it goes back to the same question about I'll just use me. I have my tattoo, my blood's tattoo, the bandana, my wall display, bragging about you know, the gang, the Bloods, and I'm holding up the signs on social media. I'm saying slat, slime, wiping the nose. If I don't commit the crime, the designated crime, to further the gang's activity, then all that is freedom of association. Is that still right?
If you do all of that and you don't commit a crime, it's nothing we can do. It's not against the law to be a gang member. It's not against the law to glorify gangs, even though they do it every day. It's just, I'm hoping that some of them get a conscience and see what it's doing to our community as far as they glorifying these young kids that's, you know, in a tug of war with their livelihoods or with their life on which direction they want to go in as far as doing right or, you know, hanging out with this crew that's actually getting in trouble.
You're referring to like that mother and father with that child?
Yes, it's a tug of war. Like the mother is saying, I don't want you to be a gang member, but the dad was a gang member and he wanted the kid to be a gang member. And now that kid, I hadn't seen that kid again. And I interviewed him, like I said, when he was 12. When he was 17, he shot 5 kids at Thorough High School. And he's gone away for good. So, you know, that's how we're losing kids to the streets. And it's not like we're picking on gangs. That's not, you know, I would rather do intervention and prevention than arrest. We can't arrest our way out of this. But, you know, I guess if people saw what this glorification of gangs is doing to our kids, maybe they'll change.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your Honor, I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Steele. Yes, sir. Mr. Sharp.
May I have one brief moment? Investigator Underwood, how are you?
How you doing?
I'm great. My name is Max Shard. I represent Shannon Stillwell.
Okay.
Just a couple questions. First of all, you testified that you have spoken to my client before. Could you just tell me when that happened, to the best of your ability, and where?
I think I've spoken to Shannon several times because of the smash and grabs. And I can't remember if he was at the house that night when I locked up 11 of his friends. Okay. I would have to actually go back and look at the report. I know he associated with those guys in 30 Deep. That's when I first met him.
We're going back to 2010, around then?
It was like 2010, I think, when that smash and grab happened.
Okay. Mm-hmm. In regards to the allegations made in this indictment, in this case, have you had any conversations with Shannon Stillwell?
No,
okay.
I just heard about the incidents. I know he got grazed one time, and we kind of wanted him to come forward and you know, tell us. Like I said, a lot of the gang members, they can get shot, they can get hurt, and they won't cooperate with the investigation because there's a street code. And you know, because during the war, he actually got grazed. He could have been shot in the head. He got grazed in his head. And he never filed a report. He left the scene. And that kind of stuff I knew about him. And I knew when he was in the car with Tiara Jones, and they were actually targeting him and actually kill her by, you know, trying to kill him.
I understand. I'm glad he's with me today. So regarding your testimony, or you had a discussion with Attorney Steele about how you determine if something that's done is gang related or in furtherance of the gang.
Right.
You remember that exchange?
When I asked him, did he pay dues?
Right. Okay, so I'm going to back up. My understanding, and I don't think you explicitly said it, but I believe it was implied, but I'm going to ask. The gang member who shoots someone that he catches sleeping with his wife, that would not be in furtherance of the gang, in your opinion, as an expert?
In my opinion, no.
Okay. A gang member who is selling drugs and pushing the proceeds into the gang, that would be in furtherance of the gang in your expertise?
Yes.
Okay. What about a gang member who has gang tattoos, who is selling drugs to pay his rent and not pushing any into the gang itself?
If the way I look at it is, if he's paying any kind of dues to that gang and that's his only form of employment, if the only way he's making money is selling drugs, he has to give a portion of it to the gang as far as his dues, because traditional gangs have dues. So I would say that the proceeds from the dirty money that goes over to the gang would be furthering the gang.
Well, what about a non-traditional? I mean, you said traditional gangs pay dues. What about a non-traditional?
If a non-traditional gang is not paying dues, and like you said, it is a single drug dealer that's actually just only using the money for themselves, then I would say no on that situation. But I think it's case by case basis. So if it's just you and you standing on the corner by yourself and you selling drugs and you paying your rent, I would not say that that would be in furtherance of the gang.
Okay, thank you. And in making these determinations, do you rely on any standard protocols or sheets or questionnaires to make the determination whether it's in furtherance or not? Are there any set standards that you rely on?
It's not really standards, but we look at the totality of the actual circumstances of what happened. If it's you and 3 other people and y'all ran into Macy's and grabbed all the polo clothing together, and even though you're going to keep your polo money to yourself, you're going to keep all your, when you go sell your polo, you're going to keep it to yourself, but the fact that you guys did it together, I would look at that as criminal gang activity.
Okay, when you say we don't have, who's the we? You're talking about individual investigators? Is that correct?
Oh, I'm saying the Atlanta Police Department. I'm sorry.
Okay, Atlanta Police Department. Okay.
Yes.
And when you make the determination about whether something's gang related or not, do you have to run that decision by anyone else, or is that your decision to make as a gang investigator?
I kind of take it, I would take the weight on my own shoulders to say whether I feel comfortable like enough to say that that person is, or that particular incident gang related, or is that person in a gang, or whether or not that person is in a gang at all. I come up with the decision on my own, just from my training, my background and experience for doing this for so long. Every now and then I will confer with somebody else that, what do you think about this? Like, cause I actually get a lot of tattoos from background and recruitment. And if I look at a tattoo and I'm not sure, I will go confer with another investigator and say, hey, take a look at this. What you think? Do you think, cause tattoos can mean a lot of things. So to me, it has to be more than one characteristic or more than one thing to go with that tattoo to say, that you're in a gang or whatever.
Understood. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Harvey? Mr. Matthews? Ms. Hangerty?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
Ms. D. Williams? All right. Anybody else I forget? Okay. All right. All right, folks, let's take 5 minutes and then I'll hear argument and hopefully make a decision, okay?
Your Honor, can the witness be at least temporarily excused?
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you, Judge.
Do we actually need him anymore?
Him? Really? It's been a long,
Man,
it's been a long day.
You gonna start with me?
Really?
Okay. Do we?
He said Kim, I think.
I hope he said Kim.
Do we need Investigator Underwood anymore?
I don't believe so, but I'd ask if she would just.
All right, madam, we're going to go ahead and temporarily excuse you. I'll permanently excuse you in just a minute, but don't discuss your testimony with anybody except the attorneys in this case, madam. Thank you. All right. Ms. Love, did you have another witness by chance you were going to call?
No, Your Honor, that was it.
I just
That was
want to
it.
make sure.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
We're going to recess about 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, Deputy Aaron, do we have everybody with us, sir?
Let's see, who's missing? If you're not here, raise your hand. Everybody's present, count.
All right, if you ain't here, you ain't gonna be here. All right, okay. All right, I'll take argument at this point in time.
Your Honor, the state will reserve with court.
Okay, Mr. Steele?
Your Honor, I again, under the confrontation clause, an expert doesn't get around the right to confront witnesses. Investigator Underwood, or Detective Underwood, is stating that she interviewed people, arrestees, spoke with other law enforcement officers, went to meetings where it was in the effort to share prosecutorial information. So I believe that all comes under testimonial, and an expert can't get around the constitutional right to cross-examine. So that's one. Two, there were no specifics here. It was just a lot of, this is what I do, and she has a great memory, clearly going back more than a decade on specific events and phones being thrown into the woods or wherever. But there was no specific policy that you can pin down and say, okay, here's what you did. It's a lot of totality of circumstances. I make the decision on whether this furthers gang activity, whether this is a gang. I also object, and I know your court knows this, to having a witness designate what is that YSL is a criminal street gang. Jurors can figure that out. You give them the law at the appropriate time, and then you give the jurors all of the demarcations of signs, hand signs, colors, graffiti, tattoos, and the like, and words and the like. And then you leave it up to the jury to determine whether an element of the crime can be met by the prosecution beyond a reasonable doubt. In addition to that, Your Honor, we're going to get into now the fourth, and I know it's 5 coming, but the fourth same agency supposed expertise. And I just can't think that it's fair to Mr. Williams.
You're saying cumulative, right?
Yeah.
It may, depending upon how the state divides that particular testimony up or presents it, and you may end up making that objection, maybe a proper objection, potentially later.
Those are the issues. And then, the other issues about a dual witness that I discussed with this honorable court previously and the like. But I'm opposing it for those reasons, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
All right, Mr. Sharp?
Your Honor, just briefly, and I adopt everything that Attorney Steele said. And also, Your Honor, I would just like to stress, in the testimony, as I recall it, when asked with how is a determination made about whether a crime is gang-related or not, the witness testified, well, first, I interpret the statute. I go to the statute. And at some point, she's not a lawyer. None of these witnesses are being offered as experts in the law. And at some point, they're simply just interpreting a statute, which is really what the jurors, with your assistance as the judge who provides the jurors with the law, that's really what the jurors are supposed to be doing. And I don't think that they need the help from a non-lawyer on how to interpret a law. As Mr. Steele said, there's no methodology to any of this. It's just I interpret the statute and under the totality of the circumstances. And I'm just, maybe it's me, I'm just having a tough time understanding what all of these witnesses are providing of value to the jurors to get to the truth in this case at this point. So thank you, Your Honor.
All right, you're welcome, sir. Mr. Harvey?
I have nothing to add.
Okay. Mr. Matthews? Ms. Hingerty? Ms. D. Williams? Okay, all right. Ms. Love?
Thank you, Your Honor. My response regarding the confrontation clause is similar to that response that I gave with respect to Investigator Dennis. At no point is the state seeking to base Investigator Underwood's expertise on something that she got from the word of 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 people even. She testified that her opinions are informed by her experience as a gang investigator, her training that she has received as a gang investigator, her interactions with gang members, family members, witnesses, the general public, her time as a school safety officer, dealing with kids who tell her, you know, what groups that they are involved in when there is no threat that they are about to be arrested. She talks about how her efforts have been in the community to prevent children and adults from getting into that lifestyle that leads, you know, to nowhere. And it's just not an issue where anyone would ever be eliciting information based solely on the word she got from anybody in particular. She stated when asked on direct examination, you know, do you take what someone says at face value, and is that how you gain your knowledge? Do you go with that, or do you make an effort to corroborate or refute whatever they're telling you? She said, I'd never take anything at face value. I always go and do further investigations. I do my investigations, and I consult with other people, other agencies, other law enforcement agents, and I go to determine what it is that I'm looking at, or what opinion that I have about this situation. So we would ask that the court not preclude this investigator as qualifying as an expert witness on the basis of the confrontation clause. With respect to the dual witness role, we thoroughly understand and will thoroughly adhere to the requirements of the court in making certain that we are clear when a witness is being used for fact purposes and when they are offering expert testimony. This particular witness has a background different than the other people who have come up and been qualified as experts. Specifically, her historical background with respect to juveniles and the ways in which they are sort of led towards being involved with criminal street gangs. At no time will we attempt to elicit cumulative testimony from the witnesses, and if we do, we would ask and we would put forth that that is the proper time to object, and we will abide by whatever rulings that the court makes as it relates to specific testimony being cumulative. But we would ask that based on Investigator Underwood's qualifications, her training, her experience, and her background, that the court qualify her as a witness in criminal street gangs, Atlanta criminal street gang trends, cultures, practices, the YSL criminal street gang, and the Rock Crew criminal street gang.
All right. Can I see the exhibit, Christina? Or Investigator Dennis? Oh, I'm right. Sorry.
Underwood.
I'm
There are
Underwood.
two.
I apologize.
4A and 4B. 4 and 4B.
All right, the court has considered the testimony of Investigator Kimberly Underwood as offered as an expert pursuant to OCGA 24-7-702 in the above mentioned case. Court has held a hearing pursuant to 24-7-702 to consider her testimony as a proffered gang expert, similar to Detectives Belknap as well as Detectives Dennis. The state has asked the court to consider that Investigator Underwood be qualified as an expert in the field of criminal street gangs, as well as Atlanta criminal street gangs, trends, cultures, and practices, as well as YSL street gangs in particular, and the Rock Crew raised in Cleveland criminal street gang. The testimony that the court has considered demonstrates that Investigator Underwood has previously been qualified as an expert witness in at least 10 other times within Fulton County and once in the federal courts as a gang expert. I have heard the evidence, the testimony, and argument from all parties, and I find that the evidence that she would speak of is admissible pursuant to OCGA 24-7-702B. Pursuant to 702B, a witness who is qualified, and that's OCGA 24-7-702B, provides a witness who is qualified as an expert by knowledge, skill, or experience, or education may testify in the form of an opinion or otherwise if that expert's scientific, technical, or other specialized knowledge will help the trier of fact to understand the evidence or determine a fact and issue. The testimony is based upon sufficient facts or data. The testimony is a product of reliable principles and or methods, and the experts reliably apply the principles and methods to the facts of the case. And additionally, that 24-7-702E provides guidance to courts on how to apply this code section, citing earlier Daubert and General Electric and Kumu for those that took her proposition. The 11th Circuit in Frazier, which has been cited earlier today, states that the witness is qualified as an expert, may testify in the form of an opinion, as in 24-7-702, if the testimony is based on sufficient facts or data, the testimony is a product of reliable principles and methods, and the witness has applied the principles and methods reliably to the facts of the case, and that's Frazier at 1259. The court must perform a gatekeeping function concerning the admission of expert scientific and technical evidence. To determine whether expert testimony is admissible, this court must consider three factors. One, if the expert is qualified to testify competently regarding the matters that he intends, or she in this case intends to address, the methodology upon which the expert reaches her conclusions is sufficiently reliable as determined by the sort of inquiry mandated in Daubert, and three, the testimony assists the trier of fact to the application of scientific, technical, or specialized expertise to understand the evidence to determine a fact and issue. Of course, that cites Daubert as well as City of Tuscaloosa versus Harcross Chemical, Inc. The proponent of expert testimony always bears the burden to show his expert is qualified to testify competently regarding the matters he or she intends to address. The methodology by which the expert reaches his or her conclusions is sufficient and reliable, and the testimony assists the trier of fact. Again, the court citing McCorvey earlier, McCorvey versus Baxter Healthcare Corporation. This court finds that state has met its burden as to Investigator Underwood's testimony. The state has presented testimony from Investigator Underwood in a hearing today and has entered her CV into evidence as States 4 and States 4 Bravo. This testimony and Detective Underwood's CV shows her extensive experience in gang investigations. Investigator Underwood testified today that she has an Associates of Science in Criminal Justice from Georgia Military College, which she obtained in May of 2000. She also has obtained the Georgia Peace Officer Instructor Certification in May of 2011. She has a Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice from Columbia Southern University in January 2023. She has over 2,000 hours of law enforcement training and over 100 hours of specific gang training. Her CV lists her law enforcement experience, the notable cases that she has participated in, that she testified to in open court, the awards that she has merited over the course of her career, her community outreach and teaching of gang awareness, and her community and professional affiliations. In particular, the court also has taken notice of States 4 Bravo, which is a transcript of her officer certification, instructor certifications, employment history, training history, which in reverse chronicle order goes from September of 23 all the way back to November of 1993 for some 696 hours. And actually, over the course of her 31 years, she has a total number of 2,110 hours of training and education. Investigator Underwood has significant experience in investigation and cases involving gangs in the Atlanta area. She's reviewed social media pages, worked on operation planners when she was assigned to the federal task force. She is familiar with certain symbols or signs, communication patterns, and practices of gangs, and she's aware of how these gangs have developed and the types of crimes that these gangs commit. And she's also testified to the content of the trainings, most of the trainings that she's attended, and has participated, and explained how those courses have assisted her in learning about gang investigations and gang members, to include her interviews with other gang members. She's interviewed others in regards to the cultures and practices of YSL and how they have transitioned from or been related to the origins of the rock crew. She is familiar, she testified in 2015 about the war between YSL and YFN, among others. And for the above described testimony that the court has just chronicled for purpose of the record, this court finds that her testimony meets the requirements of Daubert and 24-7-702. And as the court mentioned, that her investigator Underwood's Testimony has been accepted in numerous federal courts, including the 11th Circuit, under Augustine, Wilson, Ledbetter, Hankey, Locascio, Archuleta, Smith, and Camacho. And I've cited those for purpose of record earlier. And then pursuant to U.S. versus Lobo Lopez, experts like investigator Underwood can be qualified on the basis of their extensive experience. And as the court has chronicled for purposes of this particular ruling, investigator Underwood has significant experience with gangs and gang investigations, including YSL and the Rock Crew. Further, the reliability of investigator Underwood's methodology is also established by this particular testimony the court's heard today, and investigator Underwood, as chronicled by the court, testified about gang history, her experiences with the Rock and YSL, common activities of gangs, how gangs interact, and among other topics. And this court finds that investigator Underwood has reached her opinion by relying upon her experience and training pursuant to Wilson 634 F APPX at 737 and Ledbetter. And further, investigator Underwood's years of experience applying the methodology that she spoke of or testified to sufficiently supports the reliability of her application to the facts of this case. And as the court cited earlier in the other hearings, that the Daubert factors simply are not applicable to this kind of testimony from a gang expert whose reliability depends heavily on the knowledge and experience of an expert rather than the methodology or theory behind it, citing Hankey, 203 F. 3rd at 1168 and Kumar 526 U.S. at 150. The court also finds that investigator Underwood's testimony will assist the jury pursuant to Wilson and Lobo Lopez, and that her testimony may, given the foundation, be particularly helpful in understanding the internal structure, rules, terminology, and methods of the gang. And her testimony will explain communications between gang members, associates, social media evidence that the state may plan to present in this case. And as the court mentioned earlier in other rulings, that since the defendants are charged with participation in criminal street gang activity, this evidence will assist the jury in evaluating the alleged gang activity underpinning of this particular charge. In summation, the court finds that investigator Underwood's is qualified in the areas of criminal street gang as well as Atlanta's criminal street gangs, trends, cultures, and practices, as well as YSL, criminal street gang in particular, and Rock, or otherwise Rock Crew, raised on Cleveland criminal street gang as well. And that her testimony is relevant and reliable. This court finds that her testimony is relevant and will help the trier of fact to understand the evidence and determine facts and issue. This court finds that her testimony is based on sufficient facts and data, specifically investigator Underwood's years of training and experience as an investigator in this area, including her 2,100 hours of police training, and in particular, her over 100 hours of, in particular, gang training, as well as her years of experience as a criminal street gang or investigator. Court finds that investigator Underwood's testimony is a product of reliable facts and methods, particularly her experience in individual cases and ability to identify and describe gang membership communication indicators. And this court finds that that investigator Underwood has reliably applied the methods and applied principles and methods to the facts of this case. So I am going to allow or qualify investigator Underwood as an expert in the aforementioned areas, subject to the state laying a foundation as pursuant to proper expert testimony, as well as the court also would remind the state again about the duality of witnesses, issues that may become, as well as maybe potentially that there may be a cumulative issue depending upon what is presented, but the court will take up those issues later. All right, anything else?
No, Your Honor, on Monday.
Monday, the 20th, that's right. You got a lot of homework. All right, folks, so we are done for the day, at least in terms of these particular issues. Tomorrow, we'll start off at 1,000 hours with the motion on the constitutionality of the gun statute and our show cause for Juror 144. And then we'll, in the afternoon, revisit the videotape hearing on Williams' motion to suppress number 10, Williams' motion limiting number 4, and Williams' motion to suppress number 8. And the state has witnesses. That starts at 1 o'clock. So the state has witnesses for that?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. All right. Anything else from any ministerial inquiry of me?
I have, just real fast, Your Honor. If I may, I don't know if it's administrative though. I sat for the first time in the juror seats during one of the breaks. I don't know if this honorable court has done that or you had one of your co-workers from your chambers have done it, but in the very back left, and then the seat in front of it, and then the back, one seat over from the left, my left, that juror could not see anyone except who's sitting here today would be Mr. Kendrick and the prosecution table. And I believe that the law is that...
Mr. Steele, let me handle that when we get to that. Here's why. I'll take a look at, and we may be able to raise the jurors from people who are taller to smaller, and I can resolve that particular issue at that point in time.
Okay.
Okay?
But yeah, I'm just...
But let me deal with that once we seat our jurors and we have an opportunity to kind of look at their vantage points.
Okay.
So
what I'm voicing though is, depending upon where a person sits as an accused, they have the right to see the jury, to see all the proceedings. Is how the court writes.
We've talked about that before.
So
I'll make sure that you all are arrayed so you can see it, and I'll have Captain Kendall make sure as much as we are able to do so for us to, so you have good line of sight at that point in time. Okay.
thank you.
All right. Okay. So we'll be in recess until tomorrow, folks. 10:00. We'll see you then. Okay.